In episode 3 of season 2 of Rings of Power, there is a coronation following the death of their long ailing king. In a large round room, the heir walks through some weapons, gets up on a platform, is watched by a rival claimant for the throne that was apparently passed over before the start of the show, who then interrupts the ceremony, and suddenly a large winged creature shows up at the end. It is 7 minutes long, and throughout the entire scene, I could not help but think of another high budget fantasy TV coronation scene.
Landing! Protector of the realm!
In episode 9 of season 1 of House of the Dragon, there is a coronation following the death of their long ailing king. In a large, round room, their heir walks through some weapons, gets up on a platform, is watched by a rival claimant for the throne that was apparently passed over before the start of the show, who then interrupts the ceremony, and suddenly a large winged creature shows up at the end. Now, these are two very different shows that I would normally prefer not to compare. But these two coronations are structurally the same scene. And yet, they couldn't look more different. They couldn't feel more different. Why? The most obvious difference is scale.
It's 250 foot long, 120 foot wide. That is still only a fraction of the floor space.
In House of the Dragon, the camera introduces us to the scene from the perspective of the peasants. We see a shot of this massive building at their level. We're introduced to the interior of the room, likewise, at their level. Notice the camera is panning up, which makes everything look bigger and grander. Rings of Power's first shot is a close-up of bells tolling to a transition of Muriel walking into the room. Notice how flat the angle is. It gives you no sense of size or even where she is. She could be walking anywhere as far as you know. The next shot is facing her, so you still have no visual clue as to the true size of the space. Once we finally do see it, it is from Muriel's perspective. Notice the camera is facing down, making it seem all the smaller. And it is smaller. The room and the crowd. I've seen audiences for Power Ranger convention panels bigger than this. I assume House of the Dragon CGI'd some of the crowd because the crowd is massive. We get a view of the surging, near endless river of small folk pouring into the room, and even when they're all crammed in there, it seems like an ocean of bodies. And the blocking and the camera is also angling it so it looks all the bigger. Then a dragon shows up, and the dragon puts all that grandeur to shame. She smashes the sprawling floor. People are running from her in terror, and they look tiny next to her. Notice how they use that contrast at every opportunity. The newly crowned king that was just a moment ago standing over everyone is now, in this moment, as small as anyone else. Even the majestic doors the scene started with appear as common doors when a dragon leaves through them. In Rings of Power, an eagle shows up, far from the crowd, so that it's hard to read how big it is in comparison to them. Even when Pharazôn draws closer, the camera is angled in such a way that he looks practically as tall as the eagle. Intellectually, of course, you know he's not, but that creative choice minimizes its grandeur. They don't even give you a wide shot to correct your sense of perspective. The only wide shots of the eagle are from the outside of the building, looking down, shrinking the eagle even more in our eyes. These are all small perspective errors. None of them are a disaster on their own, but taken together, the cumulative weight of all this is felt and matters. Then there is the lighting. Each shot in House of the Dragon looks like a Dutch master painting. It is dusty, dim, muted, and has a clear sense of art direction and style. The lighting in Rings of Power makes it look like a TV kids fantasy movie. It's flat and oddly saturated and unflattering to the costumes. I've been told that a lot of the costumes were in actuality rich and regal. Amazon allegedly spared no expense with the fabrics and the jewelry, and yet all that effort does not translate in the show. Many of them look cheap, and I think that much of that might come down to the lighting. But even beyond all that, there is the dialogue. It's a long scene, but Aegon's coronation has very little dialogue. Almost all the emotion comes from physical acting. I mean, look at this facial acting from Aegon. He goes from uncertain to surprised delight to confidence all in the span of a minute, and all through his face. Muriel's coronation has tons of dialogue. Muriel gives a speech, it's interrupted by a heckler, the chancellor, the priest, even Elendil gets in on the action. There's a lot being said. Too much being said. They're so busy telling us what's going on that we don't feel what's going on. I mean, this scene ends with a coup. What is the audience supposed to be feeling? Horrified? Nothing about the swelling music is helping us feel that. More to the point, what is he feeling? Pharazôn unsheaths his sword and stands proudly at the end. Something that Aegon also does. But with Aegon, they add this mini character arc even in such a small act. You see his uncertainty. You see his surprise. You see his humanity. That's a person that crowd is roaring for. And you feel that. That same moment in Rings of Power does not choose to give us any new information about the character of anyone. It quite literally is 40 seconds of this small crowd chanting Pharazôn and nothing else of note happening. So there's nothing to distract you from how hollow and small it feels. There were more people chanting for the Horde at BlizzCon than there were people chanting for a potential king here. There was also more enthusiasm. And that matters. Scale, lighting, dialogue, even what this scene means for the wider context of its show. In House of the Dragon, this one sequence is a culmination of political machinations spanning an entire season. And Rings of Power, famously, has so many plots that it has not been able to give this one much focus. I could count maybe 7 scenes in the whole season and a half leading up to this that set up pieces for this coronation, and most of them were in this very episode. But that's what happens when your narrative lacks focus. This is what happens when your production lacks time, or attention, or experience. These little mistakes slip through. Now, I'm not making this comparison to say that House of the Dragon is more competently made, although that's true. I contrast these two scenes to illustrate and to highlight the little choices in a scene that put all together make a big impact. Thank you for watching. If you like blacksmiths forging amidst the siege of their city, or brutality and betrayal, do check out my book Bonesong, Diary of a Sentient Sword. You can read the first 10 chapters completely free in the Kindle link in the comments. It's a very fun ride with breakneck pacing and a cursed sword with a pesky conscience as the protagonist. If that's not for you, feel free to just subscribe and the usual things. Thank you so much for your support.